Hello and welcome to Living with Mary J. So glad that you're here. Today's show is very powerful. Actually, it's a continuance of another show that we've done last season. It's about raising your kids. There's so much information on raising your kids, and even just today we'll touch on just a few points. We won't cover them all that there are, because raising kids, there's so many things to consider, the do's and the don'ts, but we're going to hit on just a few, so stay right there. We'll be right back. Welcome back. As I said, we're speaking about raising kids. I'm the mother, as most of you know, of 3 beautiful kids. They're 2 girls, 1 boy. They're completely different. And as we've talked before, if some of you might remember, we've discussed different things about raising kids, and it's such a wide, there's so much information, so much advice that we hear from other people on how we should raise our kids, the do's and our don'ts. But from my experience, I'm going to share some things with you, because after all, it is Living with Mary J. I have 2, pretty much most of them are teenagers. 1 preteen and 1's just out of teen. So I'm going to go ahead and say that they're teenagers. And they're so completely different. And I wanted to tell you is that, first of all, this is so major that I want it to be the first point that we talked about, is that on the don'ts on raising children, you don't want to compare your kids. That is so, it's just really, really, really big. When I spoke about this earlier in another show, my daughter was with me and she was listening, and she was like, "Mom, it was one thing that you forgot to say, and it's so important." And I asked her, what it was, and she says, "You forgot to say and tell people don't compare your kids." And so we discussed that. I asked her why it was important to her, because she was bringing this to me. Of all the things we talked about, she thought that was so important. And I was like, oops, I did forget to talk about that. And it is so important. If you just look at everyone around you, everyone in your family, maybe the people that you work with, no one is the same. We're all different. Even if you think about ladies who have twin births, they have twins at the same time. Those, in most cases, I think in all the cases, those babies, even if they're identical, if they look alike, they're going to be alike. They're going to be completely different in their personalities. So that's, in raising kids, we have to realize that we can't compare one child to another. Now, going back to my children, I have 2 kids, 2 daughters to speak of, 2 daughters. They're almost two years apart. And at one time, I was kind of like saying, I'm going to call Baby M. Baby M started walking this in 9 months. So I was expecting Baby T to walk within 9 months, but Baby T started walking in 16 months. So I carried her a little bit longer. And it's just, when we look at accomplishments of one child, we may want the other child to reach those accomplishments too. But that's not the case, and you just shouldn't do that. We'll find ourselves pushing the child. For instance, when I was growing up, my older sister, she was very bright, and she's bright today, but she was extremely bright, and she excelled in school. She was in the Beta Club, in the Honor Society, honor roll. Now, I was pretty smart too. I did have honor roll all 4 years in school, but my older sister was just, she was senior superlative. She was just amazing. And it was hard for me when I would hear my parents talking about how smart she was, and if I brought a B home, I thought a B was pretty good. But no, matter of fact, I didn't bring B's. I had all A's, but sometimes I might have struggled, or if a teacher called home, my parents would say, "Well, you know what, your older sister, I never had this problem with your older sister. She did her work. She was just this, and she was just that." And I didn't like to hear that, because it was like they were comparing me to her at all times, but I was me. I had my own ways of doing things, so to speak. When it came to studying, I had my own method of how I studied. I got things done, accomplished, but they were always comparing me to my older sister. And that made me feel, at first, basically, I felt a couple of emotions, quite a few. But first of all, I started becoming insecure about a lot of things, so insecure about what I could do, maybe even what college I should attend. She went to this other big school, and I didn't think that I could make it to that school based on some things, because in the back of my mind, I just couldn't measure up to what my parents saw that my older sister had. So it was making me feel insecure in a lot of things. It made me feel insecure when it came to maybe looking for a job, because it just seemed like everything was just happening for my older sister. She was, when she went for an interview, she would get the job right away. I would have to maybe interview with a couple companies. I mean, it took me a long time to get my first job. And so I was kind of doubtful for myself, just feeling really doubtful as a person. So and I think it all, matter of fact, not I think, I know it stemmed back to them, my parents, my parents comparing me to my older sister. So I just wanted to tell you that story because it's not good. And another emotion that I felt was that I had this anger inside of me, and the anger wasn't aimed at my parents. It was aimed at my sister. I was just really angry with her. You know, why would she, be so smart? Or why is she so beautiful? And, why? And I just didn't like her. I'm laughing because one time she had this sweater, and I actually just kind of ripped the sweater because I was just mad. And not that I was a bad person, I really wasn't. I was just mad because I couldn't, it seemed as though, measure up to how my parents thought I should measure up in comparison to my older sister. So enough of those little tales, but we really just shouldn't compare our kids to one another, and because it's going to have a couple of effects on them. Another thing is, I was telling you, I ripped my sister's sweater. That was mean, and that's some form of aggression. So some kids will have some form of aggression towards either the parents or towards the sibling that you're comparing them to. So, or if it's not a sibling, it could be someone else. So what we need to teach our children is just be the best that he or she can be. And just once they do that, we don't ever need to say, well, Johnny is he was accepted into Yale, and Johnny has a 4-year scholarship. What happened to you? Why didn't you do that? Johnny has a job down at FedEx or some other company. I don't know why I pulled FedEx out, but and why aren't you getting this job? Why are you still on the sofa, so to speak? So it's just not good. We should just tell our kids to be the best that they can be. And I'm saying tell, but in that telling, we're supporting our kids. If we're telling them, we also should show them. If they need some help, we should support them, because not all kids are the same. Now, when it was time for me to go to college, I was a little bit independent. I filled out all my college papers. Even my financial aid papers, I filled them out, and then I would take them to my parents and just told them where to sign. I mean, if the application said that they need a tax paper, I would go find their tax papers and I would get those, and I would just do that. So I was very independent. But then some people need parents to kind of, as I said, I have 2 children. So from hands-on, one of my children, she needs my support a little bit more than the other one. I would have to pull everything, download some things to her. We talk about things, and we come to a conclusion together because I'm offering that support. But on the other hand, my first child, she just gets anything that she wants to do. She just goes right to it. And it's okay, because as a parent, we're supposed to support our children as much as we can, to a point, okay? When I say support, it means to a point, not everything. They still have to be very independent. But going back to comparing the children, as I said, it's very important, and there's another effect that they can have. Now, I'm getting these effects from an article that I read on Huffington Post that was printed in 2015. It was a very good article, and it was actually hitting on some of the points that I thought was very interesting. In comparing the kids, is that also it can lead, it can form some type of bad relationship. Now, I've kind of hit on this, for an instance, when I gave you the examples. In comparing, the bad relationship it can lead to a bad relationship between the parent and the child, because the child will form some type of resentment to the parent. And that resentment, you don't know how it's going to come out or how it's going to stay inside the child. The child may not communicate with you on some things that the child may need to. They may just keep it inside because they feel inside that you're just not on their side, that you're always being negative in a sense. So it'll hurt a relationship on that. Or if something happens something wonderful can happen. The child may be accepted into a college or to some type of organization, and they may not even want to share that with you, to have you attend, because you've been so critical to them. So it will hurt your relationship. So you really, really have to be careful with that. And then on the other hand of that, it can hurt the relationship between child and child when you compare one another. And I gave you an example of that, but really I just want to stress that when you compare one child to another, then they may become resentful to the other child. And that's not helping a relationship, especially if they're siblings. That's not healthy, because what I tell my kids is that one day I won't be here and they'll just have each other. And that's something we need to keep in mind, that when we're no longer here, we want our children to support one another and to be there for each other. But if you damage that relationship or have been the person causing that relationship to sour, or to, as we can say, go south, then that relation, they don't have each other even when you're gone. They have some type of jealousy toward one another. They don't trust one another. They feel some type of resentment to one another. And that's not good. Siblings should be very, very close. I remember when I was pregnant with my second child, and I had my first. My first, as I said, was a girl, big girl, young lady now. When people were asking me what did I hope my second child would be, I told them that I wanted a girl. I said I want another daughter. And the reason was I always, because I think I wanted them to be close to one another. And I think that because of what happened, or what I experienced as a child, as my parents always comparing me to my older sister, I wasn't as close to her as I should have been. And although now I guess I could change it, and I'm working on that, but I'm just saying that was something that happened. So I didn't want my kids to go through that. So I wanted them to be very close, and I wanted them to be, they're close in age, so I just want them to be best friends. And I think I'm nurturing that now today. I don't compare them to one another. And I realize that they are completely different. And in that matter, I have to be careful what I say. You never want to say something against another child to another child. And I hope I'm not confusing you. If you have one child, don't say anything bad about that one child to the other child. No matter how you're feeling inside about something, if something happened, you remember you are the adult. You are the adult, and you've got to always be the adult. And the child is, in fact, your child. Even if the child gets older and you feel as though the child can handle what you're saying, it's just not good. It's never good to talk about one child to the other child. It is like the most horrible thing that you can do. So my advice to you is just do not do that. I don't have an example for you on that because I don't do it, and I just urge you not to do it. It's just not a good thing to do. So we need to keep in mind that our children are our gifts. They're a gift from heaven. I always say that they're the closest thing to God that we have. I mean, they're like the freshest thing, a newborn baby. I mean, they just have arrived. And so if you have a baby, I have my children, one's 17, the other one's 12 going on 13. And I'm, up in age. They're closer to God than me. I mean, just most recent, just coming from heaven, so to speak. That's how I look at that. And they're just so precious. So our children, we want to make sure that we do the right thing in raising them. And my disclaimer right now at this moment is that I'm not the most perfect parent. And that's something that I always tell my children, and I urge you to do that, is let your children know that you're not perfect, that you make mistakes, that you're trying to do the best that you can with God's help. God is your guidance, but with God's help, you're trying to do the best that you can. and let them know that you will make mistakes. And sometimes you'll tell them to do something and it may not be the right thing to do because you're human and you will make mistakes. And if that should occur, it comes forward that you have made a mistake, then you can say, hey, look, I told you I wasn't perfect. I was just trying, because your best interest is always on my mind. You come first. That's what you're telling the child, which is true. The child always comes first. So you're trying to do your best. And they have to feel that you're trying to do your best, but they also have to know that you are human, that you too can make mistakes on that. And then they'll feel so much better. I mean, I use that all the time. I'll tell my child something, and they'll ask me, well, how do you know? And I say, you know what? I'm just trying to do the best that I can. It's not that I'm perfect, but I'm trying to do the best that I can for you. So let's just do it this way. And when I say that, it's like they melt, and they accept what I say, because that's just like, oh, okay, she's not saying she's perfect. She's not saying that she knows it all. She's just trying to do the best that she can. So always make sure you do that. Now, this other thing, a do that I learned from my dad, and it works, and it's so important. It's something that he did with me. He said that when a child is able, especially when a child gets a regular job, that they're getting a paycheck every week or every 2 weeks, is that you give that child a responsibility. And the reason why you're giving that child a responsibility is that this is helping the child mature. And in a sense that he now has, or she has, some type of responsibility to grow. And then you use that particular responsibility to talk about other things that may occur in a child's life. For instance, when I got my first job at McDonald's way, way back, I was just so happy to have my own money. And of course, the first couple of months, my dad let me spend my own money the way that I wanted to spend it. We were having a good time. I was having a good time, just buying clothes, buying makeup, buying all the little purses that I wanted, all the little toe rings, all those little cute things. Didn't save anything, not my first 2 months of working. So then, he called me to the kitchen table and he was like, okay, we got to talk. And so, of course, we talked about savings. He was like, hey, you're going a little bit wild here. You know, you got to save. So we talked about putting a certain percentage away. And then I thought that was it. But he said, you know, I want you to pay the telephone bill. I was like, what? Pay the telephone bill? How much is the telephone bill? I only make X amount of dollars. And he said, well, you're grown enough now. You got your own job. You're driving to work. You're making money. I think it's time for you to pay this bill, and you can do it. Now, I was paying, back then it was Bell South, back home in South Georgia. And the bill was I would still remember today. It was $91.57. I had to pay that every month. So when I got my paycheck, I was looking at it, and I was like, okay, well, $91.51 goes to Bell South. And I did that, I think forever, until I left home, until I got married or went off to college, whichever one came first. In paying that bill, that gave me a sense of responsibility, kind of grounded me. It really did. And I felt really good. I felt accomplished when I also, in that sense, I got my own checking account. I had my own checkbook. I would just write that check out to Bell South, put it in the mailbox, and then sometimes I'll even take it in. And when I took it into the office to pay, I just felt so good. I had this little responsibility, and it was all mine, and I felt like an adult. And I was ready for the world at that point, I think. So giving your child some type of responsibility is just the right thing to do. It is so good. It will help your child be a better person. Okay? It is so important. So going back to, we've talked about some things that you need to do and then some things that you don't need to do. And this is something that you do need to do. Now, we're always talking about, and we hear all this parental guidance, okay? That is like when they're watching television, when they're going to the movies, it's this thing that flashes up, parental guidance. You can put parental guidance on the remote, right? You can do that. And your child knows about the parental guidance. You put it so that they can go to certain channels. But what you need to do is teach your child to have their own child guidance. Okay? Because you're not, as I said, you're not going to be with that child, your children, all the time. So they have to know. They have to know what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. And so they have to know, with my children, they know what type of music that they want to listen to, not want to listen to, what they can. And at one point, I wouldn't let them listen to anything. I would say, you're not going to listen to this. This is, has horrible lyrics. They're saying horrible things. You don't need to listen to it. So I started out very early telling my kids what they can't listen to and what they can't watch on television or at the movies. So now that was my parental control on them. And I remember my oldest child saying, Mom, you are so lame. You're nothing like the other parents. The other parents are letting so-and-so do this, and they're letting so-and-so do that. And you're just horrible. And I said, no, I'm not. And I told my oldest daughter, I said, you know what? And I'm going with her because she was the oldest one. And the first one too, I experienced a lot of things, of course, with the first one. And I said, baby, let those other people raise their children. I'm going to raise you the best way that I can. And no, you cannot listen to that music. No, you can't watch that movie. And so to this day, there's some shows that she won't even watch, even though she's old enough. She has her own guidance. It's kind of funny. I did hear the speaker speak one Sunday at church, was saying that she had messed up her child by putting so much good into the child that now that it's called that foundation. That even when the child goes off to do something else, they may pretend that they can do it, but they really just can't do it. My daughter tells me all the time when she comes home from a party, she's all dressed up and I may ask her, where are you going? She said, I'm going to a party with friends. I'll be home, and I already have a set time what time she should be home. But I'm like, okay, well, make sure you're home. Well, guess what? She is home way before that time. And it's because she's like, those kids were doing this, and it was just, oh, Mom, I wasn't part of it. And I'm laughing to myself. I'm like, okay, yeah, she's got this. She's got this. So that foundation has been laid. But I recall back in the day, when she was in high school, it was like, Mom, you're just awful. You're just like the worst parent. But I held my ground. And that's what we have to do when raising our children. We have to hold our ground with our parental guidance, that later they will have their own guidance that will guide them. They will decide. The guidance is, I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to do the drugs. Okay? I'm not going to watch certain things on television. And that's another thing, parents. We don't need to be watching everything with our children. I used to love to watch just a little bit of Grey's Anatomy. I wasn't an advocate. I wasn't all into it. Actually, when I began watching it, it was on the reruns. On a late Saturday night it came on, really late. So I really wasn't up to date. But some of those scenes were something that I couldn't even watch, by myself. And so there was no way I could watch that with my child. And so one day my daughter was asking me, what did I like to watch? And I said, and I don't even watch a whole lot of television, so I told her I watched a little bit of Grey's Anatomy, and she wanted to watch it with me. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. And I explained to her why. And she was like, oh, okay, well, Mom, I don't like to watch that kind of stuff anyway, and I'm surprised that you're watching it. And when she said that, it was like, oh, yeah, I've done good here. So we, as parents, we never should let our guards down. We need to be the parent at all times. And so, as I said, we have our parental guidance there, but and that should be a cycle. As I said, it becomes the child's guidance. It guides them of what they can do and what they can't do in life. And when you see that, when they're taking control of that and that foundation is laid, it makes you feel good so much inside. Because after all, we want good, productive children. I remember my mom saying that she loved all stages of her kids' life, from infancy until when we're grown children. She said, you guys were just wonderful. And that's what we want. We want our children to grow up to be decent people that we want to be around. I've known some people that just don't want to be around their own children. Their children coming home, they're frowning. They're like really upset, wanting their kids really, I know this story, and this is a true story. This particular couple, when their daughter got out of school, she could not come back to their house. They were like, she's out, we don't want her to come back. So when the daughter, she didn't have her own job just yet when she graduated, but she could not come back to her parents' home. She ended up staying with another relative, I think, because they just didn't have that connection. But I'm thinking, if they had grounded that child, let that child get, as I said, the guidance that the child needs, then they wouldn't be feeling that way. So it's so important to make sure that your kids are well grounded. And remember, yes, we all want to be our kids' friends, but you can't be. God has placed you as that kid's or that child's parent. And in parenting, it means you take the adult role. You can't be just as cool as a kid. If your child, and I know I'll probably get some letters about this, if your child is wearing his pants down or she's wearing her pants down, whatever the case may be, you don't need to be the type of parents doing the same thing. You got to make a difference in the child's life. You've already, and what I tell my daughter, sometimes I go shopping with her, and she loves a couple, those young little stores. I'm not going to call the names, but we're at the mall and she goes to those and she's like, oh, Mom, this is so cute. This will look so cute on you. And I'm like, it might, but it's your years right now. This is for you. It's not for Mommy. So I still have to be the mommy. So I go to the stores where the clothing is a little bit more mature. And I mean, that's my choice. Some of you are probably going to say, I still wear what I want to wear because it looks good on me. It may look good on you. Okay, so I'm not saying anything bad about that. But I just want to say, if you want to be the type of parent okay, I don't want to just kind of dig in because there's so many views to look at this. But I try to separate myself and how I dress and how I carry myself than my kids. I just don't do that. So all in all, guys, as I said, in raising our kids, there is a lot of do's and don'ts. We can just talk forever about this. But hopefully today we touched on some things. Mainly is one, I just had to tell you, you do not want to compare your children. Do not compare them to each other. Do not compare them to other kids outside of your home. Just encourage them to be the best that they can be. Okay, that's number one. Number two is that you want to support your child in what they're doing. You want to make sure, like I said, that they can be all that they can be. But sometimes they need your support. So you want to be a supportive parent. Okay, and then the next thing is you want to make sure you give your child responsibility, some type of responsibility to say, I can do this, I'm ready for this. Okay, I'm ready for adulthood. And then finally, you want to make sure that your children have a sense of guidance about what they're doing in life. They're guided by what they watch on television, the music that they listen to, the relationships that they have with one another. That and there's so much more, that they're guided by that foundation that you have given them. That is so important. It has been wonderful talking to you. I'm hoping that I've helped someone with this, because I know when I'm talking to you, I'm talking to myself, because this is my life. I'm Mary J, and I'm just living this life. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day. Thank you.